Hey everyone, welcome back to the PAC-South podcast, or should I say the podcast of champions. Uh, our conference is about to produce so many champions in their various conferences in real life, both women's and men's basketball. Um, Quite a great spectacle that we have. South Carolina already winning the SEC for women's basketball. Obviously, men's basketball, Duke looks unstoppable this year. We talked about them last week. They did get the win against Michigan in that kind of weird non-conference slot there. St. Louis still has a chance to win their conference. Florida leading the way in the SEC, as well as a couple other teams with an outside shot. We're going to give Charlotte a little bit of a shout out because they get bullied around on this show a good bit, but they are in a shot at the American Conference as long as everyone else loses in front of them. So very fun stuff. We head into the last few weeks. Women's basketball last week, men's basketball last week and a half. We updated our rankings. We are up through the 25th. This show being recorded on the 27th. RPAC South women's basketball is still crazy in third place. Washington, Iowa State, and Notre Dame within 6 points of each other, Pat. Is that a shock with how things are going? Notre Dame seems to be doing a little worse than usual. Iowa State, streaky. Washington's just kind of going. Who actually finishes in that top 3 slot with South Carolina and Duke?
Man, I think that's a tough question because I think it really boils down to or depends on kind of how you see these teams, right? Do you go with the consistent option who's been a little bit less consistent, albeit in conference play with Washington? Do you go with Notre Dame or Iowa State, who are clearly talented teams on paper, but it hasn't really like fully clicked or fully meshed for them this year? And of course, Iowa State, as you sort of mentioned, is really, really streaky. So are you going to get the good Iowa State that we saw at the beginning of the year, or are you going to get the Iowa State that lost, 8 straight games?
I think it was 5, but still.
Yeah.
They're on another one right now. I think they're on 3. So, I mean, definitely not.
Put them together, 8. There we go. But I don't know. I don't believe in this Iowa State team as much as I did at the beginning of the year. Obviously, Audi Crooks is phenomenally talented offensively. She's a great bucket getter. But her defense, especially in pick and roll, is a little bit concerning for me as we kind of go into the stretch run and you're expected to play these, high end or high caliber teams. So I'm going to go out on a limb. And just because I think Hannah Hidalgo is really, really talented, I think the ACC outside of really Duke and North Carolina is fairly wide open on the women's side. I think Notre Dame's going to make a late season push and get themselves into the 3rd spot of our conference standings.
For ACC, you do have Louisville up there at the top.
Ooh, I forgot about Louisville. Yeah.
I mean, that's a great point. I mean, Duke, obviously, ACC, they're right there at the top. They probably, as long as they are able to beat UNC this weekend, will take the regular season title. But then we go into the conference tournament. That is worth a lot of points there. So let's say Duke kind of falters a little bit. Notre Dame could next thing get hot and win the conference tournament. And then, Duke will then be losing out on some points. And then the field will kind of come back together. I don't see anyone catching up to the South Carolina team right now. They are 118 points up on Duke, who is, I think, a good 40, 50 points ahead of 3rd place. So, I mean, that kind of tells you how good our top teams are. I mean, I think South Carolina, they win the SEC tournament as well. They're pretty much locked in to win the PAC-South Conference. So pretty dominant display there. Really shows you what Dawn Staley and that team does over there. Going on Iowa State real quick, I think that if they are able to get hot at the right time and be a little bit more consistent in their just overall performance, that team could be scary.
Yeah.
I don't because when they're really good, they're really good. Not a lot of teams are better than them. Audi Crooks, whenever she's going, it's hard to stop her. I mean, but that being said, Iowa State, when they were winning all their games earlier in the season, she was averaging 25 plus points a game.
Mm-hmm.
That's really hard to continue to ask. Yes, she is a superstar, but it's going to be really hard, especially as you get deeper into March. I could see this team making it to an Elite Eight still, but I think once you really match up against those high-powered, like all-around great teams, if they were to match up with a South Carolina, a UConn, unfortunately, then I just don't think that they have enough firepower outside of Audi Crooks. But nonetheless, a team that could make an outside chance. I think, unfortunately, even though Washington is in that third spot,
I think
that they stand the least chance of holding on to it. So there's our women's basketball outlook. We will slide over to baseball a little bit as we talk about the top. We are 2-3 weeks in already. 2 weeks in.
2 weeks, too full.
Kind of an interesting top. I mean, Duke, they're in the top of every sport for us, so not really surprising there. Florida, one of the best teams in the country. New Mexico, best start in school history. All three teams are tied with 14 points at the top. Who doesn't finish in the top three? It could be all of them. It could be none of them.
I'm going to go with New Mexico here. So my logic behind that is I know a lot of our points do reward, obviously, series wins. But also if those are ranked matchups, rivalry matchups, that boosts it a little bit. And I think both Duke and Florida have better opportunities to at least enter into high-profile rivalry games, right? NC State's a decent program in terms of baseball. Wake Forest is a rival of Duke. While they're not super great at other sports, they are very good at baseball. So that'll give them another ranked matchup to hopefully take advantage of. Florida obviously has Miami this weekend and Florida State. Both of those are ranked teams, plus every ranked team that they'll play in the SEC. So I think I'm going to go with New Mexico solely because playing in a weaker conference in the Mountain West, I think they'll rack up wins, and I think it should be, I'll say, a little bit easier to get consistent series wins, but I think it will hurt having that lack of ranked opponents or ranked matchups at the end of the day.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that of conference matchups, they may get one ranked matchup in there, but certainly nothing of the ACC and SEC. I'm going to go a little bit of a different thought process. I think that Duke is going to be the team that doesn't get it. I don't think that they're quite as good as Florida, obviously. I think Florida is definitely a top 5 team, even though they're sitting at number 10 right now. I think New Mexico, the lesser conference, will benefit them. Yes, they don't have the highest ceiling as a Duke or a Florida or any of the other teams in those conferences, but I like their ability to convert on them more often. Even if they do drop a game over the weekend, I think they will still get the series win. So, yes, they won't get the conference sweep, but they'll get the conference win. So they will still be able to capitalize on a lot of points there. I mean, as we've seen, they have been able to put the bat on the ball, and honestly, they've generated an unreal amount of runs to start the year. That will definitely come back to earth. That will not stay like that. And if they do, we might have other conversations with the Lobos. But I like their ability to stay at the top of the Mountain West. And I think Duke, while starting the year good, I think that ACC play might hurt them a bit more than people are expecting. Florida, however, great chance of winning the conference for us. I think that is a great team. We're, as I already mentioned, we will talk about them here in a few minutes with the big Miami series, that happening in Coral Gables. I think this Gator team, they lost the first game of the year to UAB, and I think that really was just immediately turn on, we're playing now, let's do it. And they blew out UAB the rest of the weekend. I believe they've only had one run game since that initial loss, so Sullivan has the Gators rolling. On the flip side of things, we have some bad baseball. Washington and, I guess almost surprisingly, St. Louis. These teams are bad.
Yeah.
They're bad. Washington just got their first win of the season the other day. So both teams now have 1 point on the leaderboard. I'm going to be completely honest. I don't think either of these teams are going to get over 20.
Yeah,
And
it's going to be a long season.
to put that in perspective, Central Michigan men's basketball and St. Louis women's basketball, both teams not very good. I think they both have about 6 or 7 wins this year. They are at like 30 points. Yes, the points are a little different by sport. However, basketball to baseball, it's a lot closer than obviously football.
Yeah.
These teams are bad. I think St. Louis might take an edge here, going off the same New Mexico logic of they're going to have a weaker conference, so they have a better chance to actually convert points. Yes, their ceiling is lower.
Yeah.
Big Ten, not the biggest baseball conference, but still a little bit better. Do you see Washington edging the Billikens here?
I think I'm kind of with you in the perspective that St. Louis will probably eke out slightly more points than Washington, again, because of the conference that they play in, right? Like the Atlantic 10's a really solid mid-major basketball conference, but it's not exactly a conference that's known for its baseball prowess. URI is usually pretty decent. Richmond's decent. Davidson's decent. But it's not exactly like, powerhouses out here. Where the Big Ten, especially after adding UCLA into the fold, the number 1 team in the country right now, after adding, I think Oregon's half decent this year into the fold.
Southern Cal seems to be having an okay start to the season as well.
Southern Cal's not too bad either. But the Big Ten's a pretty deep baseball conference. I'd say more top heavy, but still has some pretty heavy hitters there. So I like St. Louis to eke out just a few more points. They are going to play schools like, no disrespect, but LaSalle. And George Mason baseball is not historically very good either. So there's some opportunities for some series wins, or if it's a 4-game set, at least eke out a split. That I think might be a little harder to come by for Washington, especially given the fact that their coastal partners in the Big Ten are a little bit stronger this year, particularly, obviously, UCLA.
Certainly. All right. Be interesting, to say the least, matchup to go through this season. Be shocking to see if we had any other dance partners that low in the rankings. And we are dogging on them. We're cheering for you, y'all. But it doesn't look good. And that brings us over to our predictions. That is that quick for our kind of analysis for the PAC-South Conference this week. Massive matchup in the ACC tomorrow, and this will probably decide who actually wins the regular season in the conference. We have Virginia going to Cameron Indoor against Duke. Duke has played a lot of big-time matchups in a small window.
Yeah.
They've looked really good since losing to UNC, and what you could argue was almost a fluke loss. Not to diminish too much from the Tar Heels. They were having a very good season, but this Duke team is a different Duke team. I feel like this isn't the team that goes in, loses round of 32. They still could, is ahead of them, but I don't think it is. I think Virginia, this is not a great spot to be in. Like, you could say, yes, Duke is getting tired from all these big matchups. I don't think that's the case here, though. I think Duke is rolling, and it helps that they're playing so many big matchups in a row because they're just at that high level. I think, honestly, if they did take a step back and play like a Notre Dame this season with how they're playing basketball, I think that would honestly slip them up. Maybe not necessarily in the Notre Dame game, but in the next game.
Yeah.
Kind of get lulled to sleep. So I think, honestly, this high caliber, consistent basketball is really good for Duke. Great going into the tournament for both for the ACC and March Madness. So I like the Blue Devils to get it done in Cameron Indoor. I think this will be a high-scoring game, though.
Yeah, I think this will be a pretty close and pretty competitive game. But I like Duke to ultimately win like fairly comfortably. I think the spread's somewhere around like 10.5 or 11 points in favor of Duke. And I think that's fair. Obviously, Virginia's a good team this year, and it's nice to see them bounce back, kind of like we talked about last week. Now, last week I did pick Miami to win. Ultimately, they lost by 3 on the road in Virginia, but I think this Duke team is just too athletic. And as you've mentioned, they're experienced in these ranked matchups, right? Like, it's not as if they've played a fairly weak schedule this year. They've played Florida, they've played Michigan, they've played obviously Carolina. So they're kind of prepared for these moments, and I think they'll thrive in it. So give me Duke here, but I will say I do like Virginia to make a decent run in the ACC tournament, and I don't know, I wouldn't be shocked if this turns into a potential ACC final, although keep your eye on Miami too.
For those of you that are watching the video version of this show, you will see that I have had a reaction for the last 45 to 60 seconds. Those listening, I just realized it after concluding my pick and analysis for this game. Should Duke play a team like Notre Dame, this might fare poorly for their matchup. Duke played Notre Dame 3 days ago. They did absolutely dismantle them. However, unfortunately, based on what I was saying, I think I might need to switch my pick.
Yeah. You might have to back the Blues now.
We'll take honestly, we'll make it interesting. We'll go against each other. I stand by this is going to be a very high scoring game. I will just lay in the bed that I made, not realizing it. I'm going to go who's, I guess. It could go either way, really. It's anyone's game. We're going to move on now to a different Duke game. The women Blue Devils will play against North Carolina on Sunday. This game being played in Chapel Hill. UNC has an outside chance of the regular season title. Duke solidifies their championship with this win. Nothing like beating your rival for a championship. Do you think they can get it done?
I think it's going to be a close game. We talked last week about the struggles that Duke had in the non-conference, and that kind of came back to bite them a little bit this week, or I guess last Sunday, technically, when they played Clemson. That's definitely a game that they should not have lost. I believe they lost by either 2 or 3 points. I know it was fairly close. But you kind of saw that vulnerability with Duke that we saw at the beginning of the season. So now the question becomes, are they going to bounce back like we saw in the midweek against Florida State and beat a team that they are, yes, ranked higher than in North Carolina? Or is this another opportunity playing your arch rival on the road where you could see them falter a little bit? It would definitely make things more interesting in our standings if Duke loses this game.
Indeed, yeah.
But I think that the Blue Devils, or Lady Blue Devils, are the more talented team here. And I think that with that advantage, I'm going to go with like a, say, 5-point victory. Because I think this is a close matchup talent-wise. North Carolina actually, I think, has a better record than Duke. But Duke had a little bit loftier expectations coming in, obviously has the better conference record. So I'm going with Duke here.
Okay. I think to an even greater extent, outside of what I was saying with the Duke-Virginia game, this is going to be a super, super close game, as you mentioned to start yours. They match up almost identically.
Mm-hmm.
You look at them head-to-head, the points average per game, half a point off. Points against, 0.4 of a point off. Field goal percentage, 1 point. Rebounds, 1.2. That's the biggest difference. Assists, less than 1. They are, statistically speaking, almost identical.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is going to be a very tit-for-tat game. You could say the advantage goes to North Carolina for similar reasons, how Duke lost on the road in men's. Do we see another UNC upset of a Duke team in Chapel Hill this year? I find it hard to believe. I think Nyla Harris is going to have to just go off for them. I think she's going to need to score at least 20 points, and I don't know if that's something she can do in this game. I like Duke to continue the momentum that they've been having throughout conference play, win a rivalry game, win the conference championship for the regular season, going into the women's ACC tournament with a lot of momentum.
Yeah.
I don't know if they can get it done, though, in the tournament. Well, we'll get there when we get there, but I like them this weekend in Chapel Hill. That then brings us to our final pick of the weekend. Kind of a weird weekend for games with women's wrapping up, men's kind of wrapping up, but not really. And baseball, there's so many preseason tournaments. Not preseason, but there's so many of these tournaments that baseball is starting to go to now. Lots of great matchups in it. You have like Texas and Coastal. I want to say ECU, even with their slow start to the season, has a couple great matchups. They're great, but then they're like, you can't really get a gauge because you might have an ace on ace, and then the matchup that you really want to see, someone may be saving for another matchup. Yep. So then it's really awkward timing. Yes, you get to see a lot of different teams, a lot of different tendencies. So I'm sure that that's great as teams tune up into conference play. As a fan, though, it's really weird. I wish this consolidated to like only the first weekend of the year if we're going to do it. But I digress. That's not what we're dealing with. But we are going to pick probably the best matchup that we have this weekend in Florida versus Miami. This game in Coral Gables, as I mentioned before. I'm surprised that this is not a like split venue. I'm surprised this is not like one in Miami, one in Tampa, Orlando, one in Gainesville. I feel like this is a series that would warrant it. Nonetheless, though, Florida team, we've talked about them already. Sullivan has the boys playing ever since their opening loss. This Miami team, though, I definitely faded them to start the year. They played who I think could be a high contender in the Big 12 in UCF. That was a great matchup. Miami ends up coming back and winning that game in extra innings. I think historically speaking as well, that is a game that in the midweek, UCF typically dominates, even over a Florida team. So getting a win like that in the midweek, I think shows how deep this Miami team is and how game ready they kind of are this early in the season. I think that they're going to shock some teams, namely a Duke. When we get to ACC play, they're probably going to be top 3 in that conference. I think you looking at it up to down. I'm not solely or really sold on this Florida State team this year. I think that they are a little worse than what we're thinking. They just haven't been fully exposed yet. Kind of in the same way Oregon State, they have already kind of gotten exposed. I thought that rank was a little bit too high. But I think this Miami team, we're definitely getting one game here, but I love this Florida team. I think this Florida team could really go deep. I mentioned before, I think this is a potential winner of the conference earlier. I like Florida 2 out of 3. Miami's going to play really good matchups. They're going to take a game. I just like the Gators.
I'm gonna buck the trend a little bit here. So we just talked about how we think Florida, both of us, will wind up at the top of our conference standings. And, I mentioned rivalry victories and things like that. And this presents a great opportunity to do so. But I don't know. I have a weird feeling about this. I felt fairly confident last weekend when we had picked Tennessee to take 2 out of 3 from Kent State. And we saw how that kind of worked out for the both of us with the Golden Flash pulling out the 2 weekend games. So I feel like we might see something similar here where Miami falters tonight in the first matchup, but then comes back strong on Saturday and Sunday to ultimately take the series. So I'm rolling with the Canes on this one.
We have a flip. Wow. So a Saturday-Sunday series winner for the Canes.
Yeah.
That would be huge. I think that would really set a precedent going into conference play for the Canes as well, solidifying their momentum. would that be an alarm button for Florida if that does happen, though? They're really good, but the expectations are different in Gainesville.
True. I wouldn't press the alarms yet. Where I would start to get really nervous if I was a Gator fan is if you drop 2 out of 3 to FSU, right? Because those FSU games are kind of similar to the way South Carolina and Clemson structure their series, where it's usually like one at home for each team and then a neutral site venue. Florida State always plays in Jacksonville. So if you're dropping 2 out of 3 to FSU and Miami, that's when I'd start to panic a little bit heading into SEC play. But I think this Florida team is too good to really panic. And even if they stumble this weekend, I think fans, let's say, understand that this Miami team is quite talented. Like you mentioned, they beat a really good UCF team that Florida itself has had struggles with in the past few seasons. So I don't think anybody's hitting panic quite yet in Gainesville if they do lose 2 out of 3 this weekend. But as you mentioned, it's kind of like LSU in Texas. Like if you start sliding, if you only lose, let's say like 3 or 4 games in a row, there's going to be people calling for your head.
And you could also add in a Mississippi State team who looks to be back to how they were a few years ago. The team looks kind of dangerous. Something to note, that Florida State-Florida series, this season it is going to be a midweek series. So they're going to be doing it a Tuesday, a couple weeks, a Tuesday. I don't love that.
I don't love that either.
Don't think historically it has been that. It makes more sense when they have it like with UCF. They do like a home and away in a midweek throughout the season. Florida State, I did not think that was the case. Although, that being said, if Florida did have a top 25 Florida State team and a top 25 Miami team as one of their select non-conference series, that would be very tough.
That would be brutal.
Not a lot of tune-up in there, but I did not think that was a thing. That is kind of tough to see.
Yeah, that's weird. Because
on the schedule, I would hate that if I was a Florida fan. You get, especially the like latter couple when you're fully in conference play. If you're having like Georgia one weekend, Florida State during the midweek, and then like Kentucky,
yeah, exactly.
That'd be awful.
That's weird because I know I went to a Florida State game in Jacksonville, and it was for sure on a Sunday. So I don't know when they decided to make that switch or that pivot.
Maybe it was with this Miami series that they put on the calendar. Yeah, I don't know, because I think Florida State had USF as a weekend series, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. So like that maybe the Florida State kind of bouncing around a little bit.
Yeah.
Still, all right. So Florida 2 out of 3 for me, Miami 2 out of 3 for you. That does it with our picks this weekend. We will be back in 2 weeks. Actually, we will have tournament talk for the women's results, men's starting to get going.
Yeah.
And then obviously we will be then into conference play. So we are expecting a lot of stuff. But like I said, no show next week. Instead, follow us on YouTube and Instagram at PAC-South Podcast. We will be having our first ever card openings. We are going to start a new little segment there. Those will be off of the show, but still obviously under our brand, if you will. So we look forward to starting that. And I hope you all follow us and like our new content as well as the content we've already been producing. We will see you all again at our regular Wednesday show in 2 weeks. So thank you all so much for listening and watching wherever that may be. And we will see you next time.